before we move on to the current state of Star Trek right now and what JJ and Kurtzman have brought to us, let's take a step back here and try and get a better foot of where we're coming from. It's not, and again, to really understand Star Trek, a big part of it is also understanding Star Trek fans and why some iterations work and some don't. Because one thing, Star Trek fans have always been considered some of the savviest fans around. We know the ins and outs of the show. We know why things are done certain ways. Mainly because of the seminal books as the making of Star Trek. It doesn't take it from, well, Captain Kirk. No, it's a Bible on just making a TV show. Any show. You gotta. I suggest you read that book now if you're planning on doing it. Technology's changed, but the process really hasn't. Putting together a pilot, putting in a script, and assembling a crew. It's basic stuff. And again, at least up until recently, again, Star Trek fans have been considered the smartest of the bunch. Because again, we know what's going on. You can't bullshit us. And we're not just ready to swallow anything and everything that's got a Star Trek label on it. We are going to ask questions. Fans back in the day were sending letters in, asking why the transporter platform flashed 2 times in that episode, 3 times in another episode, and then 4 times in another. We kept track of this from the very beginning. And this is a very dedicated bunch of fans, and they came out of, again, existing sci-fi fandom. There had been some movies at that point, but a lot of literary sci-fi fans. These are very brainy people, okay? I mean, we're talking the mid-'60s. Sci-fi at that point on TV. You wanted the smart stuff, we're talking Outer Limits or Twilight Zone. The continuing series stuff was really kiddie stuff. Lost in Space, that's what CBS went for. And all the Irwin Allen stuff, it's like really more action-oriented, not much character, not much plot. Sometimes attacking the sea view, fight ensues. That's your plot. Even going back to early sci-fi stuff like Tom Corbett, Space Cadet, Space Patrol, Rocky Jones, Space Ranger. It's like, not very often did you get into really heady stuff. It's a lot of stuff for the kids. There. It's dry again. So when Star Trek came along, it was a bit of a godsend. Harlan Ellison was an ardent fan, an ardent supporter of it. I'm a fan. I only saw was the 2 pilots, but he was one of the guests of honor at Tricon. In Cincinnati, the World Science Fiction Convention that year, '66. And Roddenberry, that was the convention Roddenberry took the 2 pilots to and grabbed some costumes and went out and made his pitch because the show was premiering in a few weeks. It was like August or so when the con was, and it's like he was nervous about getting some reaction, some fans, because he wanted to know who his audience was. And someone mentioned the convention, he grabbed stuff, his work print of the cage, what he had, what the version of the War Noman has gone before at that point, and hey, book me to Cleveland. And he got standing ovation. It's like we ran the first pilot, and it's, hey, you got any more? Well, I got this other thing, and they ran the cage, and reaction was just as big. And from that point on, it's like everyone was talking about this Star Trek thing, this Roddenberry guy. It was also where he first met B. Joe Trimble. And managed to work the Irish charm and cajole her into it, because at first it was like, what's a Gene Roddenberry? Like, no, we worked a long hard. We're not going to let some Hollywood guy win, but he came in, worked it in, and suddenly Star Trek was the talk of the convention. And the fan base was built. A lot of it came from the SCA, Society for Creative Anachronism. These are the medieval reenactor type thing, that see them at Renfest all the time. They're the ones who, and the SCA is still a very big organization, and you got a lot of this. Fandom is a very big crossover thing. Nobody is really a fan of just one thing. Like, looking over here, I had a half dozen sonic screwdrivers. I got blasters mixed in with my phasers and lightsabers back here. And somewhere I've got, a Farscape, pistol. We're all over the place. We don't just select the one thing. And so, yeah, one of the most ardent supporters early on were SCA members. And that kind of alarmed people when the protests started going down to local stations, and these people are showing up dressed, well, not many people had Star Trek costumes at that point, so they're showing up in their SCA garb, which was armor and swords and something, looking like a bunch of barbarians ready to storm the castle. So this is the kind of fans you're talking about, who built the fandom, and who wrote those letters and protested outside of KNBC in Burbank because they liked what they saw. And again, NBC was aware that the whole thing about demographics. They knew who the audience was. They knew it was mostly college students and kids, and I think where the messed up was they didn't quite appreciate where the actual spending dollar was going, where the most of the spending in the market was. I think it was still primarily housewives. And it was by 1970 they realized, no, it's really the 18 to 34 males, college guys, And that's when they were, okay, yeah, maybe we were a little hasty on Star Trek. But, what's done is done. And history goes on from there. But that is one of the reasons why there's such a fight over Kurtzman Trek and the stuff going on, because a lot of it doesn't match. And that's more than just saying, well, we screwed up in this point. No, it's a lot of it is deliberate and malicious. It's like they've got some kind of grudge against Star Trek. To whacked out what game we're going to do it our way. Screw you. It's like, well, our way got us over 50 years. What's your stuff done? You're about to run the thing into the dirt. Because a franchise that attacks its own fans is doomed. And Star Trek is now at that point. They are openly attacking their own fans. It was bad enough when they're just being critical and saying, no, we know what we're doing. Leave us alone, little fanboy. And just that kind of dismissive reaction is what torpedoed Nemesis. Because we don't like being talked down to, especially when a lot of us have been here long enough. To say, you guys wouldn't have a job if it wasn't for us. And let's kind of remind them of that. And again, they having very little effect as far as Enterprise go at the time. So the next best thing was, okay, well, you don't like it? Well, we're going to torpedo your movie. And that's the thing. Can't just, say Nemesis died because it was a bad movie. It was a bad movie. But that's not what killed it. Because even Star Trek V won the weekend, like I said in the previous one. It was when it realized this kind of stunk. That's when it went down. But Nemesis never even opened. Because the blood was that, the bad blood was there. It's like, really, you don't think we think we're just bug splats on the windshield of Voyager? Well, fuck you. We're gonna, we'll see how bug splats are. And Nemesis just didn't even open. They got a total of $19 million opening weekend, which is pathetic. I'm pretty sure even without adjusting for inflation, the motion picture did better than that. Every movie did better than that. And again, even just for inflation, is even more pathetic. There's basically most people just stayed home. It's like, we ain't going. It's like, maybe later, if it's a good movie, will come out. But for opening weekend, no. Other movie studios moved their openings to account for Star Trek because they didn't want to get squashed by Star Trek. But it's a given that Star Trek movie is going to win the opening weekend. So I think it's Harry Potter was coming. They moved, a bunch of movies, big, fantasy, genre tempo movies moved their dates because they didn't want to get stuck with the Star Trek. And then what happens? Star Trek Nemesis comes out and it gets beaten by a J-Lo rom-com. That made people sit up and pay attention because, okay, at least the ones who knew how it works. People say, well, I guess the franchise fatigue is set in. No, bad franchise fatigue is set in. That's something students still can't quite figure out. No, it's not just, we're tired of the product. We're tired of it being bad. But that's what I'm saying. It's like, and now, after all these years of Kurtzman and JJ setting up the thing and then Kurtzman running with it, we're now at a point where the revenues dropped off so much and they've spent so damn much on this thing that they had to sell out to Skydance. Yeah, unlike Desilu, well, Desilu, it was the most popular year Desilu had in years when they sold to Gulf Western. Paramount has been bleeding money, and a lot of it was the gobs of money they spent on Star Trek. Just Kurtzman spent, he wasn't spending like drunken sailors. He was like an entire drunken task force. Entire crews of battleships couldn't keep up with the way Kurtzman was going. But the owners, new owners, Skydance, the bean counters there are saying it might be advisable just to cancel everything Star Trek related for the next 5 to 10 years. Because what is going on now is actively damaging the brand. And we need to let time for people to forget the bad stuff and let that drop off and remember the other stuff. Because it is affecting merchandise sales. Merchandise sales in general are down like 90-some%. And that's across the board. Original series, next gen, DS9, and JJ stuff and Kurtzman stuff, the sales are non-existent. Nobody's buying this stuff. And it's something that I think it's something you could, what was in the comic back in the 90s called the ElfQuest effect, where you flood the market with so much junk, and some of it, just not measuring up. The fans not only don't buy the new stuff, they stop buying the old stuff, and collapses the entire franchise there. So yeah, you can whine and bitch and moan and throw hissy fits about all those old typers who just don't like anything new. The fact is, this franchise is going down in flames because of horrible mismanagement and storytelling choices that have driven off one of the most loyal fan bases in the history of mass entertainment. Star Trek was the envy of every other studio in Hollywood. A lot of these franchises they've got going out now was a direct response. Hey, we need something like Paramount has with Star Trek. At one point, Star Trek was $1 billion a year cash cow for Paramount at its height. Now, I want you to keep in mind, where I'm coming from here. I was 2.5 years old when the show premiered on NBC. And I would, again, by my reports, I would be sitting there with my dad watching it on NBC. I don't have any conscious memories of it. From my mom said, yeah, you watching it, you'd be sitting there next to him. But the result is that I don't have a first memory of Star Trek. I don't have a Discovery thing. It's always been there in the back of my mind. I knew what it was. When we found that first Enterprise model in Sears in like 1972 or so, I knew what it was. Nobody ever explained what this Star Trek. No, it's the Enterprise. I want it. When the animated series premiered in 73, I already knew what it was. I knew it was Star Trek, and I knew it wasn't the original. So when it finally hit the rerun market in a big way in 74, even before it would show up on Channel 9 at repeats here and there, because it started rerunning pretty much immediately after it went off on NBC. There wasn't really a fallow period. Channel 9 was run out here. On Saturdays, I catch it once in a while. But it wasn't until it really hit big time, and I think certain contracts had to run out, like out here with whatever Channel 9 had going. But around 74 or so is when it hit big time. Channel 4 got it out here, and they were running it 5 days a week. 4 o'clock, Star Trek was on channel, and just before the news. And that's when the thing really started kicking off. And that's also when you see a lot of making a Star Trek. It had been in production, it had been in print since '68, but it started picking up really big time. World of Star Trek, David Gerrold's 2-book, and Troubles hit around that time. The blueprints, the tech manual, the mass market version of the Concordance. That was all around this time, 76, 75, 76. And that's when the Star Trek phenomenon is now a catchphrase. So yeah, I was, technically first generation, but really it's kind of like in the between there. And I would watch it with my dad apparently. And again, I spent the last several years working with B. Joe Trimble on one last update for the Star Trek Concordance. So do you think I'm enjoying this period right now? You think I like having to go on there and talk about how bad Star Trek is now? Like, you think I'm okay with this franchise being run by writers so scientifically illiterate they make Lost in Space look like Cosmos? Sonar in space, I say no more. But this goes beyond just not liking the show because it's new and it's different. No, this is killing the entire franchise. It's like, to paraphrase O'Brien, and Kurtzman, is not you I hate. It's what you're doing to I hate what you're doing to Star Trek. Yeah. You're an incompetent idiot, need to go. So for those of you you're looking at stuff for the first time, yeah, by all means, please research, learn about this, but also learn something about the fandom that grew up with it. Why we have a franchise here. It's like the one reason why we have Star Trek conventions is because the old mainline science fiction conventions got tired of all these little Trekkies running around. That's kind of where the name came from, Trekkies. It wasn't a compliment term. It was these Trekkies. They don't know about They don't know about real science fiction. They don't read neat books. They just went watching Star Trek and think they're sci-fi fans. And we took the name and made a badge of honor. Yeah, I'm a Trekkie, so what of it? But it got to the point where it's like you go to a sci-fi convention to meet some author or whatever, talk about whatever book it, and they got a bunch of roids running around in Spock ears. So okay, fine, screw you. We'll make our own. And then it was like 72, the first convention. And the response was ridiculous. They think they hope to get 500 fans. They get a few thousand, And then when they think they're going to get a few thousand, they get 20,000. Chicago convention got shut down by the fire marshal. They overloaded too much. But yeah, if you got any questions about, why don't you, how about asking us and don't just dismiss us as a cranky old farts that don't like anything new? Because if you know anything about Star Trek fans, you know that's not us. It's like, yeah, it may take a little convincing to go on to launch onto something new, but it's like, we're not just going to reject it outright. I mean, not everyone hated the Next Gen right off the bat. In fact, it was more skepticism. And frankly, the original cast were the real downtrodden on that one. A lot of the fans took it, it's like, we're a little leery of what's going on here, but, taking the advice of Nichelle Nichols, who was a cheerleader, hey, Gene Roddenberry is a part of this, give it a chance. And we did. And yeah, it was a little rough there because every show's got a little, kind of breaking in a bit. And yeah, that one episode with, it certainly came across as borderline racist. It wasn't what was originally planned, but that's what happened. And that's what happens with a new show. You're figuring things out. But there's still a lot of good things in that first episode, first season of Next Gen. So, and it became very much a beloved show. Okay? Very few people. I think you probably fill up, a minivan with a number of people who still reject Next Generation and everything after it. Okay, so don't get to think, oh, everyone hated it. No, not everyone hated it. And DS9, same thing. The little perplexed by a space station. They don't go anywhere. You go, yeah. Something even the original series proposed was like, sometimes let's stick around a planet for a couple of weeks, see what happens. Yeah. It's like, we can go anywhere with this franchise, and this is proved. Yeah, they could go anywhere. Like Rick Berman said at the time, it's like if Star Trek was wagon train to the stars, then DS9 is the rifleman in space. So with that, I think we'll get ready to proceed onward to where we stand now, and a little more on why it's not working and what needs to be done to fix these things. So we'll talk at you later.